Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce our next speaker. We're very privileged to have Dave deBronkart, better known as E-Patient Dave, with us today to give us our keynote address. Dave, known online as E-Patient Dave, is the leading spokesperson for the E-Patient movement, empowerment, engaged, equipped, and enabling patients. A high-tech executive and online community leader for many years, he was diagnosed in 2007 with stage 4 kidney cancer, with a median survival prognosis of just 24 weeks. He used the internet every way possible to partner with his care team, and thankfully today he is well. Dave has truly walked in our shoes. His first book on healthcare is Laugh, Sing, and Eat Like a Pig. I have to read that. In 2009, health leaders named him and his doctor to their annual list of 20 people who make healthcare better. And in 2011, his TEDx talk went viral globally. Volunteers have added subtitles in 25 languages. Its tagline is his appeal: let patients help. We're very fortunate to have Dave with us at this conference to speak on patient engagement and empowerment, transforming the doctor-patient relationship. So please join me in welcoming Dave.
So, hi. I talk at a lot of places, but I hardly ever talk to a group like this. You know, when I think about what's happening in your lives, for some reason my mind goes back to when I was in the hospital, and the memory that most sticks with me is the moments when nurses would show up at the foot of my bed, and no matter who else they had just seen, I mean, this was a unit that does a lot of high-dosage interleukin cases and other extreme cancer cases. I just had the experience that there was nobody else in the world that they were aware of at that time, you know, and they would just look and be with me and say, "How are you doing?" You know, and they knew that the answer might be not good. They knew, but you know, what I've come to see about nursing is that nursing is where science meets caring and touches the patient. And in the healthcare conferences that I attend, there's a lot of people worried about costs, and especially in America, and all kinds of other political malarkey. And what I want people to think about health care as with at least as much emphasis on the care aspect as the medicine. Because I think if we think in terms of people receiving care and being cared for, then it will alter our priorities in a constructive way. So with that as a prologue, what I'm going to talk to you about today, sure, I'll talk about my story, but the point here is that what's emerging now, and there's new research documenting this, is that we, the patients, even though we've had no medical training, we certainly get a whole bunch of frontline experience, but we haven't been to medical schools, we truly can do a lot to influence how healthcare proceeds. So I'm going to be appealing to you to think about this. It's funny, most conferences I say, look, folks, I'm not going to be talking about patients generically. Patient is not a third-person word. Think about this in your family. Well, I don't have to say that to. So let's get rolling. Transforming the doctor-patient relationship. Now, that may seem impossible. I know when I was diagnosed, it never occurred to me that I could have anything to really bring of value, because obviously these were the people that I go to when I'm dying. But listen. Two of the senior doctors at my hospital, Beth Israel Deaconess in Boston, the one on the right is Warner Slack, who's been saying since the 1970s that patients are the most underused resource. They started out talking about our information systems, but it's increasingly being said now that patients are the most underused resource in all of healthcare. This is an emblem that some folks at a Dutch medical school have developed for conferences. The guy who runs this innovation program at this university, it's in a town called Nijmegen, which is on the German border, about an hour from Amsterdam. He will no longer attend any conferences or speak at any conferences unless they have patients speaking. And patients encouraged to attend, subsidies, because if you keep having conferences about any industry without the customer, the ultimate stakeholder involved, the best meaning conversations will be, well, without the voice, wait, what about me? So think about this. It's a new expectation. Patients can help by talking with each other. That's why we're here today. This is why you have the forum. This is why we have the ACOR Kidney Cancer Listserv. By participating in clinical trials. My oncologist, David McDermott, says the main thing that holds back the development of new treatments is the difficulty of getting patients who are willing to be in clinical trials. And of course, through advocacy and funding. No better place in the world, as far as I can tell, than this group for that. Now, how the heck did I come to be here? Well, I am a classic example of somebody who didn't know or care or do much about healthcare until I had one of these, whoa, now I care moments. So I worked in high-tech marketing, mostly in the graphic arts. I'm a data geek. I like spreadsheets. I like seeing what can be done with automated workflows controlled by good quality data. In 2007, as you'll hear, I was diagnosed as almost dead, and I beat it within 6 months, which is pretty remarkable. Some people think that patient empowerment is anti-doctor. No. I love good doctors. They're why I'm standing here. 2008, I started studying this e-patient movement. I'll explain that word in a moment, just as a hobby, and started blogging about it. In 2009, some friends formed a Society for Participatory Medicine, which is about doctor-patient partnership. And I wrote a blog post unrelated to that, total coincidence, that much to my amazement ended up on the front page of the Boston Globe. It was about my medical record, and I had accidentally stepped smack into a giant mud puddle that changed federal health policy within 2 months in Washington. That was amazing. And I started to feel this calling to get out there and speak. In August of that year, my company cut my job in half because I was spending so much time in Washington, completely unexpected. And in 2010, I went full-time, and I've been doing this. And in 2011, started doing it internationally. So this is what I do full-time now. It's just an amazing sequence of events. And it raises the question, when you face death, like game over, and then you come back, does something shift? Because I'm not working any harder today than I did the rest of my life, but all of a sudden I'm getting different results. I'm going to be talking some about facing death, because that is part of, as you know, some people don't like to talk about it, but it's part of what we do. And it's part of the experience. It's part of what makes it real. Now, this doctor here, Tom Ferguson, was a post-Woodstock hippie med school student. He graduated. He never practiced medicine, but he observed medicine. He was very much a patient empowerment guy. He wrote a magazine and then a book called Medical Self-Care. He was the medical editor of the Whole Earth catalog, if you remember that post-Woodstock book, which was like how to grow your own food, how to build your own house, and so on. And he saw, obviously, that we do most of what we do to take care of ourselves is self-care, but when sickness strikes, a major limiting factor is the information that we have access to. And when the internet came along, he saw that dramatically changed that aspect of the equation. And he started spotting these people across the top here. The man on the left is Gilles Friedman, the founder of ACOR. The man in the middle is Danny Sands. That's my personal physician, who happened, to my great good fortune, to be a colleague of Gilles Friedman in this circle of Tom Ferguson's friends. And various others here. And he coined this term, e-patients are equipped, engaged, empowered, enabled. There's no official sanctioned list of E's. People say educated about evidence and expert and on and on and on. The point is, what he saw is that somebody who's engaged in their care is not a clueless recipient of care, like a car in a car wash. Somebody who can say, doctor, what do you think about this? Doctor, I found this. actively involved. It's the opposite of being helpless. John Sharp of the Cleveland Clinic found this document on the ePatients.net website. It was funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, a 120-page paper that Ferguson was working on when he died. His colleagues finished it. It's called the ePatient White Paper. My wife's a veterinarian. She said, it's got a black cover. Why is it called a white paper? Well, that's the mysteries of policy circles. Anyway, John Sharp read this and said, if you haven't read he said on Twitter, if you haven't read this white paper, you don't understand the future of medicine. Now, the Cleveland Clinic people know a little bit about this. So that's like, what's going on there? Now, in 2009, by the way, when the Society for Participatory Medicine was formed in 2009, they realized that it just would not do to have it be run just by a doctor like most medical societies. So they decided to have co-chairs, a doctor and a patient. And much to my amazement, they elected my doctor and me as the co-chairs of this new society. So I went from almost dead in 2007 to co-chair of a medical society in 2009. This is like the jiu-jitsu approach to dealing with cancer. You take the energy of the attacker to propel you forward. They did this great, they interviewed several of us, and much to my amazement, they made it a cover story, The Patient of the Future. Now, this is a magazine that goes only to C-level, hospital CEOs, chief medical officers, et cetera, et cetera. And they said it was about this new relationship. They sent a photographer to take a picture of me, and I figured it would just be the usual headshot that goes, in the text of the article. Well, quite honestly, I would have worn a different shirt if I'd known they were going to do this. Full page on the table of contents. But this is kind of the point. A middle-aged schlump sitting at home looking stuff up on the internet. And this is what they said is the patient of the future. Now, and there was a great feature article. Then every year, there was a mention of this in my introduction. Every year they do 20 people who make healthcare better. Number one was Atul Gawande, the surgeon who writes these fabulous essays in the New Yorker about healthcare costs and surgical checklists. He writes books. He's wonderful. Number two was Dean Kamen, the inventor of the Segway scooter, who now is working on amazing robotic limbs for amputees. Imagine my amazement when number three was me in that stupid shirt. But fittingly, significantly, tied with me in third place was my primary physician, Danny Sands, the co-founders of this society. Now, if I were in business to do this, if I had hired a publicist to achieve this, I would have said, wow, you guys are worth every penny I paid you. But I didn't. This was the editors of this magazine saying to hospital executives, this is the future. This is what we see happening. So it raises the question, am I really, in high tech, there are thousands of new things that come along, and most of them are a flash in the pan. They're gone in a moment. So you learn to watch for what are the signs that something really is going to lead to a future. So first I looked, who's online? Well, I've been online since 1989. I'm one of these early geeks on CompuServe. And in 2009, the Pew Internet and American Life Project said 76% of U.S. adults are online. And most of them are looking for healthcare information, by the way. So that's one data point that says, in this case, this guy here was an indication of something that would be common in the future. Then there's who's romancing online. Well, I found my wife on Match.com in 1999. A year later, I had to go give a speech in Paris. Oh, darn. And so we got hitched, and that's on our honeymoon. And in 2009, 1 in 8 weddings in the U.S. was people who met online. 2011, the number was up to 1 in 5. What's possible today, and it's ironic, things... If you have access to information or things, resources, whatever that you need, you may discover that they are more accessible than you ever realized. I'd been in a distance relationship with a woman in Florida. That didn't work. That ended. I went on Match.com. Ginny was 12 miles away in the next city over. Pretty amazing. So, I want to remember some people who aren't here today. I have a sister who's a singer, and she has a song. She does the ones who aren't here. It reminds me of, Well, it was written during the AIDS epidemic, but it's easy to think of it in terms of kidney cancer patients that we've known. Lior Dangor is an Israeli member of the ACOR listserv who had IL-2 and was recovering pretty well, and all of a sudden he died of something else. He's gone. There was a Pakistani mother. Her daughter was getting the latest information from ACOR and bringing it to the oncologist in Pakistan, who didn't have access to it. And for about a year and a half, she was an active member of the listserv. She's gone now. My friend Monique had metastatic breast cancer. Great sense of humor. She wrote a book, The Courage Muscle, A Chicken's Guide to Living with Breast Cancer. Funny book. And after 10 years of success, she finally succumbed last December. Judy Fetters, another metastatic breast cancer patient who prolonged her life even after other extraordinary things. She prolonged her life an extra 18 months she was a member of 4 patient communities, and she went out and found people in research labs working on things that were never going to appear in a medical journal. One of them was an experimental, just a probe into a potentially interesting biological marker. She brought it to her oncologist. See, this is participatory medicine. Patients doing what they can, bringing it to work with their physicians. Said, what do you think? He said, it can't hurt. They tested her. She was a match. So they concocted this N of 1 treatment, and she lasted another 18 months because she was in her last decline at the time. And to her, what was important about that, see, so much of healthcare thinks in terms of just what you can see under the microscope. But what was important to her was that she got another 18 months of watching her grandchildren grow up. But then there are those who are here. The first kidney cancer patient symposium I attended just during the year of my treatment and recovery, there was a guy in one of the breakout rooms later in the day who started out by saying, well, when I was diagnosed 13 years ago, and I almost fell off my chair, because as far as I knew from what I'd read online, there was no such thing as surviving 13 years. You look at the American Cancer Society website about kidney cancer, you get no indication that these things are possible. To the extent that hope makes any difference, holy cow. This is why having a discussion forum like this where we speak up about how we see things can really change. See, doctors often are trained not to give us false hope. I said to my oncologist, well, what about false no hope, for heaven's sake? And I met a guy, he doesn't want his name disclosed, but a high-tech executive who was diagnosed 22 years ago, at age 20. And in fact, he had been told that he was a goner. And he was sitting there glum, 20 years old, waiting for a CAT scan. And the 60-year-old lady who was sitting next to him was chatting, and she said, wait a minute, stop this. You're not going in for that scan. She took him to the medical library. Remember, this is 22 years ago, couldn't pull up Google. And she showed him the studies in the books. It said, these were all done on old people. There is no data on people like you. Interesting stuff. What I'm saying here is do not give up hope, because we have no idea what we don't know yet. And this is real. I'm not just making this up. I'm an MIT graduate. This is scientific stuff, okay? Facing death with hope. Birth is like setting sail on a ship whose mission is to go out in the ocean and sink. This is a quote, through whatever mysteries of the universe, 25 years ago, I discovered in my library in Salem, New Hampshire, some cassette tapes of speeches by a guy named Ram Dass. And if you were ever in the hippie community, you may remember the book Be Here Now. He wrote this book. He was a psychologist at Harvard named Richard Alpert. He was a colleague of Timothy Leary. They ate acid together. Timothy Leary went to jail, and he went to Tibet. And he found a guru, and he took on the Sanskrit name for breath of God. And he gives these amazing speeches where he brings Eastern wisdom, but with the sense of humor of a New England Jew. So he says things in his speeches like, if I were crazy, how would I know? which is really mystical in a sense. But one of his talks was on facing death. Okay, and this is what he pointed out. He had all kinds of perspectives. We are all headed for the grave or the incinerator someday. And the question is, what happens between now and then? And who gets to say? 1,200 people a day wake up in the United States not realizing they're putting their socks on for the last time because they're going to have sudden cardiac arrest. We at least got some notice. So what are you going to do with that time? That one of the first things I heard on ACOR was if you don't want to die of kidney cancer, then the game is to stay alive long enough to die of something else. That's it. I mean, some people woke up today and they'll be dead by nightfall, but for something else to kill you, a bus, who knows? A heart attack, if you die of a heart attack, you didn't die of kidney cancer. Woohoo! That's victory. Well, and this goes to hope. Now, I'll be talking more about hope later on, because when there is no hope, the biology changes. Or wait for the next treatment to come along. That's why this group just saying, more treatments, come on, what more can we do? Just keep surviving, then someday a cure comes along. Maybe. It's a game worth playing, I say. Now, people ask how I got into this, and I say, well, it's sort of like JFK. Now, John Fitzgerald Kennedy was a war hero in World War II. His PT boat, PT-109, was sunk in the South Pacific, and he swam around in this lagoon and rescued all his buddies. He ended up with permanent back problems, but he became a war hero. During the presidential campaign, a reporter said, Senator Kennedy, how did you become a war hero? And he said, well, it was involuntary. They sank my boat. And that's how I got interested in healthcare. I went in for a physical, and I had a shoulder problem, just a sore shoulder. And so I went and got an x-ray, and this is one of these moments, you may remember this moment yourself, 9 a.m. the next day. I'm at work. I vividly recall the sights, the sounds, the feelings, the blue carpet on my partition walls, the look of the telephone. The phone rings and it's my doctor. And he says, Dave, the radiologist looked at the scan. The radiologist called me, and I pulled up the image on my computer. He was doing this from home. Boy, do I look forward to when I can pull up the image at home. And he said, Dave, your shoulder's going to be fine. It's just a rotator cuff problem. But incidentally, there's something in your lung. And that shadow wasn't supposed to be there. And to make a long story short, I go into more detail for people who aren't so familiar with this. CAT scan showed that there were 5 tumors like this in both lungs. That meant that it was cancer and not lung cancer. So it raised the question, where's this from? For those with a certain sense of humor, you'll note that abbreviates to WTF. And as Deb said, if you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. We found that it was a kidney cancer. There were, in fact, 2 lesions like this. One had already erupted from the front of the kidney and was attaching itself to the bowel tissue, but had not dug in yet. That's one of the ways that I'm very lucky that I'm still alive. There was another one that erupted from the back of the kidney and had attached itself to a big muscle in the back called the psoas muscle, and again, had not quite dug in. So now we knew. I went home and Googled. Some people try to tell patients, don't Google. I don't have to tell you, are you kidding? Some people, care, If people are scared, if they want not everybody wants information, but if somebody does, for heaven's sake, help us find good information. So many people talking about health policy say, well, the main problem is that patients are irresponsible and don't want to do anything. But what happens when we try to? Say, stay off the internet. Well, anyway, what I read was almost all patients are, the prognosis is poor, almost all patients are incurable. And when you don't feel sick, this is a heck of a thing to read. This is a diagram from proleukin.com, which used to be the website of for the drug that I got. This graphic is no longer there, but totally by coincidence, look at the lung. That's my lesion. This is their standard diagram. Down in the leg, The first symptom I had was 6 weeks after that shoulder x-ray. That would have been when I first went to the doctor because my knee started hurting like hell. I actually said to friends on my blog, boy, I wish I could go back to where all I had was cancer. Now I've got this sore knee. Well, be careful what you wish for because it was a big bone met. Look at the head there. That shows a brain met. Mine was actually in the skull. I have a moth-eaten area at the back of my cranium. And because I'm an overachiever, and those are all standard ones, I have these other spots. So while my leg was in the process of breaking, I had to use a walker. I couldn't use a regular one because I had another met in my ulna here, and if I put too much weight on it, I might have snapped my arm bone. And then just for good measure, 3 weeks before my treatment started, I had what I thought was a cold sore in my tongue. Look at the head again. It erupted. It turns out I had a metastasis growing out of my tongue in my mouth. I was very sick, and they wouldn't give me a prognosis, but I just Googled and Googled, and it took hours, but I finally found a website where I could score my disease. The only symptoms I had were that I was tired in the evening, but I was 56 years old. I'd been slowly losing weight, but to me that was a victory. That's what my doctor had been telling me to do, right? And my appetite had been dwindling. But all those things counted against me, and my median survival that I found on this chart was 24 weeks. And that focuses the mind, as I'm sure you know. So I woke up at 1 o'clock that morning in the middle of the night, looking at the ceiling of my bedroom, thinking, what am I doing sleeping? My life is ending. My own father's funeral had been a year and a half earlier. I remembered that day. I thought, what's the weather going to be like on the day that my mother buries her son? What's it going to look like out the window the last time? Sorry. You talk to the family. I sat down with my daughter and her boyfriend, who they were just out of college, and said, this does not look good. Here's what we're going to do. And at the end of the discussion, I said, one more thing. I don't want you guys to get married prematurely just so you can do it while Dad's still alive. We're going to deal with this. So then, there's the question. What are my options? The odds may be bad. What can I do? Well, I choose to get engaged, get in gear, do everything I could. I love this cartoon. You may have seen this many years ago when it was circulating. Never give up, even if my head's halfway down the bird's throat. Norman Cousins in the 1960s had an incurable stomach condition. I knew about this guy. I'd read about him, Saturday Review magazine editor. And he figured as long as he was dying, he might as well enjoy himself. And it was before video, so he rented a movie projector and he watched Marx Brothers movies and laughed his butt off. And he got better. Now, science didn't have any explanation for it at the time. He went on and wrote a book called Anatomy of an Illness, as perceived by the patient. Today, we have the newly discovered field of PNI, psychoneuroimmunology. Science has figured out now that mood measurably affects the nervous system, which measurably affects the immune system. We don't know for certain that that's what happened with Norman Cousins, but my point here as somebody who's scientifically trained is don't think that something doesn't exist just because science hasn't explained it yet. If that were the case, then scientists could all retire, And he said, and this is my message to you, the basic theme of this book is that every person must accept a certain measure of responsibility for their recovery. So what do I do in the 21st century? Marx Brothers don't crack me up, but my birthday was coming, so I said, okay, people, I want every Bugs Bunny cartoon ever recorded. I want the whole first season of Saturday Night Live, and I got those at my birthday party. That's funny, I had just the best birthday party ever, because I'd said, let's party like it's 1999. A year later, I was all better. I said, okay, let's party like it's not 1999, and nobody came. It was like, dude, it's over, So, attitude. My family had decided to register me into Bernie Siegel's Exceptional Cancer Patient Workshop. As it happens, I went into treatment instead. I was committed to trying laughter as well. I was a member at the time of the New England Champion Men's Barbershop Harmony Chorus, and I said to my doctor, I'm tired in the evening, should I stop going to chorus? And he said, no, you do not want to stop life activities that you love. It sends the wrong message. And I said to people, okay, well, this is not bad. My prescription so far, there aren't many options, but my prescription is laugh and sing. It could be worse. Then the corker was they sent me a diet saying you got to stop this weight loss. They sent me a diet titled How to Increase Your Caloric Intake, put real whipped cream on all desserts, have pizza for snacks. So I said, okay, folks, now it's laugh, sing, and eat like a pig. And if I get out of this alive, I'm going to write a book and call it that. And I did. So there it is. That's my prescription. And what it is excerpts from my journal that I kept online with some blog posts interwoven about how patients being actively involved in their cases can make a difference now. The next e-patient activity that I did, my doctor, as soon as the biopsy had confirmed it, my doctor literally handed me a prescription slip with acor.org written on it. I joined the community. And within the first 2 hours of posting a note there, they said, this is an uncommon disease. Get to a hospital that does a lot of cases. There's no cure, but high-dosage interleukin-2 sometimes works. But the side effects are severe, which is why you got to get to a specialist case. Don't let them give you anything else first because it reduces the chances that interleukin will work. And here are 4 doctors in your part of America and their phone numbers who do it. One of them happened to be Dr. McDermott at my hospital. Consider this, okay? If you believe in relying exclusively on the establishment, to this day you cannot find a website that gives patients this advice. Okay? Patients look at these problems differently. If we speak up, we can influence what the priorities are. And by the way, my oncologist, Dr. McDermott, has confirmed that all of that is correct. It's accurate, clinically accurate stuff. So here's a question. How can it be that the most useful and up-to-the-minute information could possibly exist outside of traditional channels? The message I want you to get here is it is not pointless for you to go looking for information and talking to other people about what they've found. In the ePatient White paper, I have a whole separate talk on this, but one of the amazing facts there, Dr. Donald Lindbergh, the director of the National Library of Medicine, is quoted as saying, when I was in medical school, I was told that a good doctor would go home and read 2 journal articles every night to keep up on things. He said, if I did that today, at the end of a year, I'd be 400 years behind. That's how much new stuff is being published all the time. And what this means is, first of all, it is not humanly possible for anyone to keep up. And it also means it is not a failure on any doctor's part if they haven't seen something that you've seen or that a friend has shown you. It is legitimate to be out there and helping. The slogan is, as Deb said in my introduction, the slogan in my TED talk is, let patients help. This is a graph of how many new articles. Since Dr. Lindbergh said that, it's gotten worse. Look at that. 900,000 new articles published in 2010. So, plenty of fodder out there to go looking for. Another thing the ACOR people told me is that regarding my median 24-week survival, they told me about this excellent Stephen Jay Gould paper. The median isn't the message. There are people who all the median does is tell you the middle person in a study. It tells you nothing about who outlived the rest of them. Statistics are used to predict when you don't have specific information. As one example, see, once you know something specific about an individual, then the general population statistics disappear. For instance, you've got to use the right statistic, the fact that a statistic exists. So, for instance, my favorite here is that the average person has 1 ovary. And that is statistically accurate, but it gives you no useful information about any individual. Okay? And in fact, you can extend that anatomically and come up with a really weird picture of the average person. But I won't go there. Also, beware of outdated information. I find that very commonly doctors at medical conferences will cite the most recent peer-reviewed data, even if it is out of date. An example was the first patient community meeting I went to like this in 2007. The opening presentation quoted data from the Kansas City Kidney Cancer Database, which was completed in 1996, and none of today's treatments existed. Holy cow. Just the fact that something's the latest peer-reviewed journal doesn't mean that it's valid and accurate. Another great item I learned from the patient community was the subject of scanxiety, the anxiety of going into a CAT scan. What am I going to find out? Well, so this is again where I was glad to know about Ram Dass. I understand being anxious about the scan, but see, my body isn't any different coming out of that scan than when it went in. The only thing, what I'm actually scared of is knowing it, knowing what reality is. My attitude is reality is what it is, whether we know it or not. I had stage 4 kidney cancer before I knew it. So the anxiety actually is not helpful. Anxiety was designed, in a sense, to help us prepare for to sense that we were about to be jumped on by a tiger. And in the absence of tigers, it's not useful. Finally, I got this symptom, the pain in my leg. I have a couple of tips for you. One morning in May 2007, I got up at 5:30 a.m., went to the bathroom, and fainted and landed on this leg. And when I woke up, it was, my femur was shaped like this. It's like, oh man, that's bad. But I had no pain because I was in shock. So my advice is, if you're going to break a leg, do it while you're passed out, because I hear it's painful. The other thing is, so I got surgery to repair this. That was my feeling during the whole thing too. Why not use humor? The other thing is, so this was after my first month of interleukin, so I was at home recovering. I was having all the side effects. If you think diarrhea and nausea are fun, try having them when you can't move fast. It's like hobbling on a walker. But all things considered, I'll take the deal. As it's like you're negotiating with the Grim Reaper. If this is what I got to do to survive, I'll take the deal. And I'm fine today. Patients spreading the word on dealing with side effects. What I read on the American Cancer Society website, these side effects are often severe and rarely fatal. Well, great. What do I do with that? That's like reading a travel advisory that says there are pickpockets in Rome. And so what I did was, I've heard that interleukin side effects are terrible. I asked the patient community, what was it actually like for you guys? And I collected 15 firsthand stories. They ranged from, I don't know what everybody was concerned about, to, I thought I was going to die from the treatment. There was one woman who said, my husband's skin flaking was so bad I had to vacuum twice a day. I thought, how much skin does he have? And I gave a talk actually at an interleukin patient summit a couple of years ago, and she came up afterwards and said, that was me. She said, yeah, I'm a real neat freak. So here's the thing. Dr. McDermott today, I asked him, because of the reactions I get sometimes, I said, some people think that my attitude is what saved my life. I said, I'm more science-oriented, but what do you think? He said, I have no doubt that the interleukin is what killed your tumors. But he said something really interesting. I don't know if you could have tolerated enough to do the job if you hadn't been so informed and prepared. Now, how's that? That's the patient conversation genuinely influencing medical outcomes, okay? So all these, I pasted them into a Word file. If you email me, my email's on the closing slide. I'll send it to you if you want. Not that anybody in Canada has any need for interleukin information, right? Anyway, and this was Monique's website, by the way. Oh, come on. Monique, when she had Xeloda as her final chemo, had the challenge of hand-foot syndrome, which also shows up as a side effect in some kidney cancer treatments. And the doctors just don't have anything they can do for it. But her husband Googled and found that if you make a paste of henna and lemon juice, it turns your hands orange, your hands and feet orange, but you can stand up again and you can handle things again. She tried it and it worked, so she put it on a blog. She made a blog, and she wisely called it Xeloda Side Effects. So now if you search Xeloda Side Effects, she shows up in the first page of Google search results. Interesting. Information not from the medical establishment. Participating in clinical trials. Dr. McDermott asked me to present this. 1995, what we had available was high-dose interleukin-2. Someone like me, the prospects were 24 weeks. In 2007, there was Sutent had just come on the market and a couple more things. My prospects were getting better. 2010, there were 5 more. new drugs developed, my prospects were better, and this is entirely because of patients participating in clinical trials. If you want to help change the world, it's one way to do it. And he said there are many more trials in process. There's a website trying to accelerate the approval process called fastercures.org, and it all depends on patient participation. So if you think we lack power, here is one instance where we can directly influence the rate of science. I looked at my medical record online. My hospital offers a patient portal. It's a crummy thing designed in 1999, but I wanted to understand as much as I could. I read into my radiology reports. I started an online social support network. CaringBridge.org is a free website where you can just set up, it's like a simplified blog that just about anyone can use, where instead of making frequent phone calls or sending out mass emails, I just post the thing. I just write something there, and people who subscribe get an email, and they come look at their convenience, and they leave notes. And I come back, and we talk. And me being me, I'm sort of like Deb, I took my tumor sizes that were being followed. She's hiding her face over there. She's going, And I got the formula that they were using for the clinical trial that I was in, and I started out with a score of 38, and after the first round of interleukin, it was 31. And that's good because interleukin is an all-or-nothing drug, and this said I was a responder. Long story short, surgery, 5.5-hour laparoscopic surgery to remove the tumor and all that junk. I mean, how on earth do these surgeons do this? I mean, on a flat screen, no 3D, in a bag of meat, okay? Blown up with carbon dioxide, snip, 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 snip. Oh, don't nick that thing, that'll be a gusher, right? And put it all in a baggie and pull it out intact. How do they do that? Unbelievable. Anyway, this is how my graph, my tumor sizes progressed. And notice what happened there after the first round of interleukin, how the tumor sizes just plummeted. Between, the yellow strokes are the 2 weeks of interleukin. Just amazing stuff. Today, I still have spots on my CAT scans, and they say they figure that it's just scar tissue, that the tumors just died that fast. They said we could cut you open to look. Oh, dear. Okay. Jerome Groopman, she just put up the 1-minute sign, so I'll be as quick as I can. Jerome Groopman wrote a book called The Anatomy of Hope, based on his long career as an oncologist. My best friend is an Israeli physicist named Doron, and when he and his family live in Israel, although we used to work together in the U.S., when they heard I was sick, he brought the whole family over for a 4-day weekend. And I said to him, "You must have thought you were coming to say goodbye." And he said, "Dave, nothing could be further from the truth. We came to give you hope." And for a physicist to say that, and he's a very strict scientist, is really remarkable. And he said, I won't go into it, but he said, in physics today, there is a field of study called emergence, which is how the great vast fields of potential actually turn into reality, and that you can change what happens by influencing how that emergence happens. I never would have expected a physicist to say that. Here's how it all unfolded for me. 5 years ago, the night of that physical, this was a guy who was dying of kidney cancer and didn't know it. 10 months later, at the office Halloween party, somebody snapped this picture, and I was very glad. It was me grinning at the ghoul, a bit thinner and less hair. I had pictured my mother's face at my funeral, and instead, in May of 2009, here we were laughing on the day when I did get to walk my daughter down the aisle. And that was a wonderful thing to be alive for. And here's what a great picture, wedding day picture. Here's that baby girl when she was 10 months old. In high school, I used to go watch her run at her cross-country meets, and I'd cheer her on. Go, Lindsay, you can do it. This was the date, her first date with the guy who is now her husband. Can you see a little something in her eyes there? That kind of magic. And this is last Monday at mile 8 of the Boston Marathon, because my little girl has grown up to become a marathoner. It was only the second marathon she's ever run. And despite the 87-degree heat, Fahrenheit, she finished. Unbelievable. And she finished in the middle of the pack. She blogged about her preparation, research into the last time the marathon was hot, what she was doing to take care of her knee, and all kinds of things. So I'm watching my baby girl become a grown-up blogger and science teacher. What can I say? It's great to be alive. We are the most underused resource in healthcare. You can help, we can help. Thank you.
Wow, that was pretty amazing. Yeah. So on behalf of Kidney Cancer Canada and the planning committee for this conference and everybody in the audience, I think we were all feeling pretty awestruck. I would like to thank you for giving your keynote address today, Dave. You have greatly inspired all of us who have had the wonderful opportunity to hear you speak in person. I'll be Googling that TED Talk and reading some of the books that you shared today. So that was fantastic. So please join me again in thanking Dave for his wonderful talk today.